It's a Minimalist Monday edition of Optimal Finance Daily, episode 1816. How Discovering Your Debt Triggers Can Set You Free from Debt by Jackie Beck of JackieBeck.com. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. Happy Monday. We're going to jump right into today's post to start the week as we optimize your life. How Discovering Your Debt Triggers Can Set You Free from Debt by Jackie Beck of JackieBeck.com. Debt is insidious precisely because it's everywhere. The debt lifestyle is all around us, but you don't have to participate. Identify your debt triggers so you can stop debt before it happens. It'll set you free from debt. Let's start with this. How much of your lifestyle is tied to debt? Recognizing the extent that debt is intertwined with your life and seeing the effect debt really has on you is the first step. Consider something obvious, like how you feel when you get your bills. I remember hating to get those credit card bills. It seemed like I just paid one when another one would appear. Then there were the fights afterwards. The accusations, the blame, the frustration at not having enough money to pay off the cards, or even just to quit overdrawing the checking account. It was emotionally draining, but that's not where the problem started. That debt didn't just magically appear. It was all triggered by something. If I wanted to get out of debt, I needed to find out what that was. Where debt often starts. Chances are you often use debt without thinking or considering other options. If you're like most people, you've probably been doing so for a long time too. Looking to debt as a solution or method of payment has become a habit. But those use debt in situation X habits don't just happen out of the blue. They're triggered by something. Something kicks them off. That's why identifying the day-to-day habits that trigger you to use debt is critical. Note that a trigger isn't a cause of debt. A trigger is just something that happens right before you use credit. Before we get into debt triggers, let's talk about what debt, also known as credit, really is. Debt means an obligation on your future, the inability to really enjoy the here and now. Worry, stress, and frustration. Guilt. What if you thought about that true meaning every time you pulled out the plastic or considered signing for a loan? I bet you'd start to make different decisions. For an even bigger wake-up call, break the meaning of debt down into specifics that relate directly to your life. For example, debt could mean being unable to quit a job you hate unless you can find a better one. Spending 2 hours a day in your car so that you can commute to the job that pays for things you already bought but may not even remember. Missing out on time with your family, etc. You probably don't want that. So the next time you think of using debt, remember that. Then focus on what you do want instead, to get out of debt for good. Finding your debt triggers. Identifying the day-to-day habits that trigger you to use debt is critical. Here's how to find them. Make a mental note of every single time you pull out a credit card, hear an advertisement for credit that tempts you, or use debt to take care of an emergency. Focus on identifying when you're using the credit, how you get sucked in, and why you weren't yet able to pay for things with money you already had. Start looking for those debt triggers now. You don't have to wait until you're about to use credit or debt in the future, though. Look back over the last 10 or so times that you took on debt. Remember that these are all examples of debt. 90 days, same as cash, home equity loans to pay off credit cards or improve the house, overdraft lines, car payments, swiping your credit card at a restaurant or store, sticking a plane ticket on your credit card because you'll have the money to pay for it before the bill is due, buying a ticket to an event when you don't have the money saved up right now to pay for the ticket, etc. What were you doing at the time? What did you go into debt for and why? Dig into your spending patterns to discover debt triggers. For example, a look at your most recent credit card statement might show a bunch of charges for food. You might see a pattern there. Maybe you're used to going out to eat every Friday night and you do that without thinking, assuming you'll pay off that credit card debt as soon as it comes due. Or maybe you'll notice that your charges are larger. They could be for things like car repairs, appliances, or electronics. What happened before you decided to charge those items? Had your car or water heater broke down? Were you attracted by a same as cash deal that you saw while wandering through Home Depot or Best Buy? Go a little deeper. Once you see the obvious triggers, see if you can dig a little deeper. In the case of eating out, do you eat out because you're harried and don't have time to cook? Because it's entertainment? Or are you just doing it because that's what you've always done on a Friday night? For car repairs, are they things that don't typically happen, like a bumper falling off? Or are they for more typical things like brakes or tires? The same idea goes for appliances. If you find yourself buying electronics or other luxury items, ask yourself what you were doing in the store in the first place. Were you bored and just itching to get out? Deliberately trying to make sure you got the latest and greatest? Rewarding yourself? Take some time to write down your answers because they'll help you change your life. Why identifying your debt triggers helps. Finding out what triggers most of your debt gives you a starting point. Not for blame or excuses like I had to borrow money because my car engine died, I work 20 miles away and there's no public transportation. But for pointing out the areas that would be most helpful for you to take action on. Like I need a car repair fund because I work 20 miles away and there's no public transportation. In other words, once you've examined things a little deeper, you'll have a better idea of where to start making changes. For example, you might need to create a budget each month, earn more or spend less, or some combination of the previously mentioned. Or it might be something as simple as creating a car repair fund, or not driving past your favorite restaurant when you're tired. Once you know those things, you can take action. You can stop debt in its tracks and get out of debt for good. You just listened to the post titled, How Discovering Your Debt Triggers Can Set You Free from Debt by Jackie Beck of JackieBeck.com. Look, the job market right now is booming, but did you know the average time it takes to fill a job? 24 days. And the average price to hire a new employee? $4,000. I'm guessing you don't have that kind of time or money to waste. But don't worry, Gusto to the rescue. What's Gusto, you ask? For the past decade, Gusto's been building a modern HR platform to help you take care of your team and keep them around for the long haul. With Gusto's full-service payroll, comprehensive benefits, and built-in learning and development tools, you can keep your team happy and engaged, even if you're remote. And when you've got tough decisions on your hands, Gusto surfaces actionable data and insights to make things easier. In fact, it's made things much easier for our podcast team here. If all this sounds good and you want to join the 200,000 plus businesses using Gusto today, head to gusto.com/OFD and get 3 months free. That's 3 months of Gusto for free, only at gusto.com/OFD. Many people put debt in the category of death and taxes. They believe it's just a necessary part of life. But this isn't true. It's totally possible and definitely preferable to be debt-free, especially if it's high-interest credit card debt. So I think the first part of digging out of debt is simply believing that you can live a full and happy life without it. When I think about my mentality when I was charging up my credit card and digging a debt hole in my 20s, I recall this belief that I would be able to pay this off easily in the future when I was making more money. And then I made more money, and that had no effect on my debt. I think many of us have the erroneous belief that more income will solve our money management issues. But we don't magically become financially savvy just because we have more money. Take lottery winners, for example. Whether they win 500 million or 1 million, about 70% of lotto winners will be back to the same financial position they were in before they won in 5 years or less. This is a pretty compelling statistic that demonstrates that money management trumps income. Another thing I noticed about accumulating credit card debt is that more often than not, I had the cash to pay for things, but I hated seeing the balance in my bank account decrease. So I put purchases on a credit card and paid the minimum. I didn't understand that compound interest was working against me, and what seemed like a manageable amount of debt in the beginning was going to explode into a pile of debt that would stress me out. So when you're considering buying something using credit, it could be helpful to remember that if you can't afford that thing with the cash you have now, you definitely won't be able to afford the compound interest that will accumulate later. And that's a wrap for another Monday show. Have a great rest of your day and start to your week. And I'll be back tomorrow as usual, where your optimal life awaits.